The loss of a loved one can leave you feeling depressed, angry, alone, lost. But you don't have to face this journey on your own. Open to Hope is a free community for anyone who has experienced loss. Find support. Find help. Find hope. Give grief a voice at opentohope.com.
Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, today we're going to talk about the healing power of art. And I know we've talked about that on other shows, and we've had people talk to us about it, how dancing, how making art. And I think it's all about, Bessel van der Kolk said it on one of his shows. He said, it's about imagination, being able to continue to have imagination. And after a loss, sometimes people lose that ability, but with time, they're able to gain it again. So why don't you introduce our guests, because they're going to be talking to us about some of this.
Okay, great, Mom. And like you said, art is so powerful, and it is such an amazing way to be able to heal. Because sometimes when we've had a loss, we can't give expression, we can't verbalize. But through nonverbal means, we can express ourselves and find hope again. And we are going to talk with two guys today. One is a very good friend of ours, Doneley Meris. And Doneley is the founder and executive director at HIV Arts Network and a grief therapist. And he's also a professor at the Hunter School of Social Work. And we are also going to talk with his partner, Hal Bromm. Hal is the owner of the Hal Bromm Art Gallery in Tribeca, and he has been down there as the owner of this art gallery for 40 years, Mom. And I know you were just there at his fabulous gallery.
Yeah, I went down there with my husband, and it's fantastic. And I would suggest that anybody watching this go down and see his retrospective that he's got on right now, because it's an amazing thing. Well, welcome, you two. Hal.
Thank you.
Hi, Hal and Doneley.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. Well, let's start with you a little bit, Hal, because, you know, I know that you and Doneley, we're going to talk about some of the artists you've lost. You've lost a huge amount in the AIDS epidemic, and I know, Doneley, you'll be showing us a clip of a dancer who was your friend that got you involved with the AIDS Arts Network. And Hal, I know you know a lot of artists. Of course, over time, you've been in the art world for many years, and people who have died of AIDS, but of other things. And I wanted to have you show some of the art that you have in your retrospective right now.
Great. Well, we're going to look at the work of David Wojnarowicz, Carlos Alfonzo, Luis Frangella. These are three men who I worked with very closely through the early 80s and to their deaths. All three of these people died of AIDS around 90-91. And David Wojnarowicz, whose work is a wonderful totem made actually of driftwood, was a guy from New Jersey.
Now, that's not the totem, the fish one, right?
That's the fish totem.
Oh, that is?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the totem.
Yeah.
Okay,
I love
it's a
that.
wonderful piece.
It's a wonderful piece. And that was part of our show in 1983. David did a beautiful one-person show with my gallery in Tribeca in 1983, and he created an entire room of totems, including a snake totem that was on the floor in a bed of sand.
Oh my God.
And the snake totem was actually sections of driftwood that originally had been one long piece that he cut so that he could spread them out in this bed of sand, and it created the impression that the snake was wiggling across the floor.
Oh my gosh.
And your viewers will see the colors in the fish totem that we're looking at, very similar to the snake totem. And then on the walls there were about 6 or 7 others.
Wow.
All fabulous pieces.
And what great honoring him, having them in the retrospective. And what about this next one?
Carlos Alfonso's ceramic piece is called Mammy Hand. And Carlos had a great sense of humor, and so he liked to play around with imagery, and you can see that here. The hand is holding an eyeball, and then the black base has actual scissors. You can see that there are scissor shapes. And this was a recurring motif along with knives in Carlos's work. Carlos came to Miami from Cuba on the Mariel boat lift. And so we're looking at a guy who had to struggle as a young gay man, young gay artist in Cuba. And then when he came to the US, suddenly felt free of all that weight and censorship and, difficult life that he had there. And yet the knives and the scissors he kept putting into his paintings and his imagery. And the thought was that, for me, was that this had something to do with his background in Cuba. And he said, you're right.
Yeah.
I always felt persecuted in Cuba.
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's look at the next piece.
Luis Frangella. Luis hailed from Argentina. When I met him in the early 80s, he was living and working in a loft in Tribeca, not far from my gallery, on Elk Street. And his partner, Russell Sharon, and he shared 3 floors of a wonderful old building, and each one of them had a huge studio. And I was completely captivated with the work of Russell and with Luis. Here we see what he called his box heads. He would find cardboard boxes, and then he would frame them in wood, and then he would use one point of the cardboard box as the nose of a face. So we're looking at one such object right here, and then through the use of his paint, you almost lose the feeling of the fact that you're looking at a box. But the pieces, of course, are very three-dimensional, very powerful, and Gloria, you saw this very piece in the gallery show. Our 40th anniversary show, we selected this piece to include.
Fabulous.
It's amazing.
Now, do we have another one? Yeah, that's it, I think. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, Hal. How does it inspire you? They have gone now, they have died of AIDS. How do they still inspire you today? And do you think they're inspiring other artists?
They definitely are inspiring. They're inspiring me, and they are inspiring other artists. A lot of artists have followed in their footsteps, learning from the work that these artists have done, and also learning from the example they set about being gay artists in a time when it was not the way it is today. You know, back in the early 80s, being gay was a stigma for most people. Now, these artists rose above that, and their audiences loved what they did, collectors loved what they did, and now, sadly, they're all gone, but their markets have escalated, collectors are clamoring for their work. But when they were alive, they even then were setting examples. David had a very abused childhood. His father beat him and his sister in New Jersey, was a heavy drinker, would come home drunk, beat up the kids, beat up his wife. It was a horrible situation. David and his sister finally ran away as teenagers, and David ended up in Manhattan on 42nd Street hustling to support himself.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine the inner strength that it took for him to leave home at that age, put himself in that situation, and yet survive it and end up making extraordinarily powerful art.
So I'm thinking
he
out
did
of
not
his,
go
out
to
of,
art school, by the
out
way.
of his great adversity, he probably expressed himself and healed through his artwork.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely,
yeah.
that's a very good. That's a very
I
good.
just want to say that you're bringing these stories and keeping them alive, I think are so important for the people of today and the artists to look at those past and to learn from them. It's wonderful. Talk a little bit about your journey, about NARCISSE, the clip we're going to see, who it was, and about starting the AIDS network.
Well, Jean-Louis
Doneley.
Morin was a principal dancer with Martha Graham Dance Company, and this particular piece that you edited for us is actually a piece that was done by a Canadian filmmaker, and he allowed when Jean-Louis retired from Martha Graham, he went back to Canada and started choreographing his own dance pieces, and through his work there, he was discovered and allowed to actually be the star of this particular film.
And then he died of AIDS.
Yes, he did.
And he inspired you.
Absolutely. One of the reasons
Don
why
has a background way back in dance.
Wow, Doneley,
Yeah.
I didn't know
You
that.
didn't know that.
I didn't. I love it.
So
Very cool.
when I first met Jean-Louis, we had this immediate attraction and immediate connection because of the dance world that we were involved in early in my life, and he was still a dancer at that point.
Yeah.
And he was was also one of the inspirations to my creating and my founding HIV Arts Network, because in the dance world, yes, there are places like career and transitions, but not really focused on HIV/AIDS, and that's part of the reason why we created HIV Arts Network, because there's a lot of dancers who are either dancing still or have stopped dancing because of the disease, and they did not have any place to go, and we're to network with other dancers who are also infected with the disease.
One of the great things about HIV Arts Network is that it provides a nurturing environment for people who are either affected or actually infected with HIV and AIDS. And the idea that there was some place where you could get that kind of comfort from somebody as compassionate as Don, and the group that he put together was very important at that time, and even today remains very important.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a look at Narcissist. So Doneley, does that almost gotta tear at your heart, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
What a
absolutely.
beautiful man.
Beautiful man, beautiful creature.
Yeah.
And a talented painter.
That's right.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
You didn't know that?
No. Fantastic.
Yeah. In fact, some of his paintings are now in collections through donations by people who inherited them, have been giving them to museums and institutions, including
The Leslie Lohman Museum.
Cobblestone streets. Finding the why in a brushstroke. Superimposing the angled feet. Directional angling of the Y, extending the angle to the canvas limits, angle elimination, Atlantic Ocean, taped canvas, the painting leaves the support. With justice. Room cracking. 24 hours in the life of a conscientious objector. carrying paint by bicycle and dripping it onto the streets of Manhattan Island. Cracking the sidewalk. Swift justice. Museum cracking.
Fantastic. Now say his name again.
Jean-Louis Morin.
Jean-Louis Morin. That was a powerful piece.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful,
yeah.
and you can see that on the internet, NARCISSE.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, the full dance is quite long.
It's three different segments.
Lovely. Now, the Arts Network, you've got some pretty heavy-duty people on your board. Tommy Toon, who else?
Wow.
Well, Edward Albee has
Yeah.
been a long-term advisor to the organization. Hal is actually the secretary of the organization.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
sadly, we lost our treasurer this year, Rosemarie Castoro, who died instantly in May.
Oh, yes.
Famous, world famous sculptor who I've worked with and known for over 40 years, and whose work you saw in the 40th anniversary exhibition.
Yeah, yeah. Lovely person. So what advice would you have to people who've lost somebody to AIDS? How have you guys coped? I mean, it's been a huge number of
we're sure
wonderful
that
people you've lost.
You've had many friends, etc.
Yeah.
I think their legacy is the work that they did, all
Yeah.
the creative process that they brought to this world is something that continues to be part of my life and Hal's life too, given the three art pieces that we just saw. Seeing those creative modalities allow us to continue with the work. It's difficult to be in the field of HIV/AIDS day in and day out.
Yeah,
seeing
I don't
dying
think people
people.
realize that it's still a problem. And
Absolutely.
worldwide, it's still an
I agree.
epidemic, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
I think you're right. I don't think people realize that it is still a big
Yeah.
problem.
There's
But,
still no cure to the
Okay.
HIV virus. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you both were saying earlier, what legacy do these artists leave for younger artists? How do they inspire them? What do younger artists learn from them? And I think one of the things that they learned, if you look at another artist whose work I showed way back in 1981, Keith Haring, who also died of AIDS around the same time as
Those
Luis and David and Carlos. The legacy is the work. And when Keith knew that he was dying and his health was deteriorating, he took pains to set up a foundation so that the work that was still in his studio that was not sold could be sold by the foundation to create funding to benefit the foundation. And the foundation helps people, young artists, institutions, in just the way that Keith wanted.
Wow.
So that leaves a legacy. David, Luis, Carlos didn't quite have the foresight. They were more, their deaths were sadly more immediate. But it's interesting to look at that today, and I think a lot of young artists are inspired by that.
Well, and I'm sure Keith Haring has helped many, many people because he's so famous. I mean,
That's
through
right.
the foundation that was
Right.
left.
Luis Frangella's nephew is also an artist, and I think that's again continuing the legacy of his artwork.
You're right.
His nephew,
Alberto Malacorto.
That's right. He lives in Barcelona,
And he's in the 40th anniversary show.
Okay, fabulous.
But I didn't know him when Luis was alive. Of course, he was a little guy. Luis always said, "Why don't you come with me? I'm going to Argentina." And he took David Wojnarowicz to Argentina, and they did a big show of East Village artists together. But I met Alberto, whose nickname is Tito, after Luis's death, and his sister. Lovely people, and he's a great artist, and he's in the 40th anniversary
All right.
show.
Well, now what I'm seeing, Heidi, right now is people are getting through with support from each other.
Yes.
You guys have had that loss. You come together around a community, and you're helping that community, helping each other. But I worked with the AIDS Health Project in San Francisco, and one of the things that I was impressed by is how much the whole community came together. I think that's the only way you got through it.
That's absolutely right.
You have to
That's
hug
right.
each other.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
You have to cry together. You have to laugh together. You have to say, they're gone, we're here. We have to honor their life. We have to do what we can to remember what they did and make sure that others don't forget. And by working with the estates of these artists. I try to do that through the gallery, continuing to show their work and promote their work. As you say, many of these artists are now very well known, but for me, they can never be well known enough.
Right.
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
also their backstories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in their hearts. I love
And
it.
I love how Doneley's got a practice downtown
Mm-hmm.
and works with people. And Doneley, where can people find you if they want to find you and use you as a therapist?
I'm actually using the gallery as my office right now.
Oh, I love that. Nice.
Most of the things that I do and most of the clients that I work with are in the arts community, which is
Oh, I love it.
wonderful.
But happily,
perfect.
most of his clients want to have appointments after work
I'm
when the
sure.
gallery's closed. So they come in and they see art, and then
that's
they get to
healing.
see Donnelly.
But how healing is that? You're
Yeah.
walking
It's
into an art studio with these fabulous, incredible paintings.
What's your email address?
Doneley Meris at gmail.com.
DonnellyMeris@gmail.com.
That's right.
Okay. I love it.
That's fantastic. And Doneley, you are a grief therapist. If I've had a loss to somebody with AIDS, give me a couple of things that I can do. Give me some tips. Give me some help.
Talk about the loss and don't just close it in. Just open
Yeah.
it up to anybody who wants to listen, because you have to get it out. And the more you talk about it, the more the healing will start, and you can continue with life.
How would you expect me to be in the first year?
Angry?
Angry, cry, let all the emotions flow through.
I'm a guy. Is that okay?
That's fine. Life is changing for gentlemen.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, I heard someone that was newly bereaved come into my office the other day, and she said, I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I'm walking around and my life has been turned upside down, but everybody's going on like business as usual. And I said, well, that's normal.
Absolutely
And she was
normal.
so relieved to find out that was normal.
Right.
After 9/11,
'Cause I was gonna
those
say,
of us
yes.
who were downtown blocks
Wow,
away
yeah.
from the disaster were basically unable to even get downtown. It was a war zone,
It's amazing.
right.
sealed off. And
We
yet
didn't get
we would go
there until-
uptown, even up to 23rd Street or Midtown, and life was going on as normal.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, what are you going to do? You have to accept that reality that those people who are not affected the way you are
Yeah.
are going to continue living their lives.
Yeah.
But what was wonderful is that people would come downtown and say, come on, we're taking you out to dinner. We know you're in shock, and we were in shock.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 3
Yeah.
weeks without being able to go to your home because everything was blocked.
That's unbelievable.
We're 4 blocks away from the World Trade Center.
Yeah, wow.
so-
That
Yes,
is a
it is.
trauma in and of itself.
So how am I going to be the second year, you guys?
He's
The
the
first
he's the
year,
expert.
I'm
You'll
out
be
of it.
laughing by
What
the
happened to
second
you,
year.
Hal? Listen, you lost a lot of friends. How were you the first year, the second year?
Kind of shell-shocked. Yeah, not kind of, I was shell-shocked.
Yeah, yeah.
And this May, when Rosemarie Castoro died, we're talking about a woman who physically bent steel, welded steel. She created her sculpture in her studio. She had a complete welding shop.
That's amazing.
She had saws for heavy metal.
Oh, I love it.
This is a woman with great strength, great agility, and a very powerful persona. So she was the kind of person who you never imagined dead.
Yeah.
You could not even, the thought of Rosemarie and death couldn't even be in the same sentence together. This was a gal who you thought would live forever. She'd outlive all of us. And yet we get a phone call that she died, keeled over in her studio dead,
Wow.
back in May.
Wow.
A horrible shock, because she wasn't ill, she wasn't frail, she wasn't
Right.
declining. You know, at least in those cases, you have a little bit of a,
So with the AIDS thing, it went on and on and on, which
Well-
was,
yeah.
That's true. That's true.
yeah. And with her, you just...
And with some people, like Carlos Alfonzo and Luis, they went downhill very rapidly. Keith Haring knew that he was ill, and he was just that much before all the meds that would have saved his life. But there was time to say, we're going to lose him, and you could
Even
sort
the
of-
guys that are taking the meds are,
It's
you know,
not
they're
good.
bad stuff. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
a lot
they're
of
so-
side effects. It's not
Yeah,
good. No.
yeah. So Doneley, the second year, how am I going to be? Is it easier than the first?
I hope so. it's different for
Depends
every
on who your
individual.
bereavement therapist is.
And your support network. If you have
That's
a
a good
good
point, Doneley.
support, then you'll be able to continue living.
Yeah.
somehow.
Okay. So, how do we get a hold of the AIDS Arts Network? It's on the net, right?
HIVArtsNetwork.org, www.hivartsnetwork.org.
212-385-4945.
Okay.
There's my secretary.
There you go. Well, Heidi, it's been great having these guys on today, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, we want to thank you guys for being on
Pleasure
and
to
for
be here.
everything
Wonderful
you're
to
doing.
talk with you.
So
Thank
much
you so
fun, and you
much.
guys are a delight. And
Well, we
Thank you.
are great fans of your wonderful work.
well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching our show today. I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley, and Heidi and I always like to say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.